You're listening to the AfricaMusicLaw.com show, Africa's premier entertainment law show empowering the African artist. And now, your host, attorney, speaker, visionary, game changer, Ms. Uduak.
Hey ML people, it's your one and only certified game changer, Miss Uduak. Welcome to the 93rd episode of the AfricaMusicLaw.com show. If you're just joining us for the first time, my full name is Uduak Oduak. I go by Miss Uduak for short. I'm a fashion and entertainment lawyer with the law firm of AB2 Law Group PC, located in California, USA. The African Music Law Show is a show that is about the business of empowering the African artist and the creative industry at large here in the US and across the African continent. Our execution is pretty simple. We take on the latest in celebrity legal drama, music business, and industry news and provide legal and business commentary and analysis on hot topics in pop culture that intersect and at times collides with the law. We also invite our industry experts, our artists, and other cool people, AML people, to share their insights and experiences to benefit you. You can subscribe to what is a weekly podcast show we try to publish every Monday, and you can do so directly on the website at www.africamusiclaw.com. You can do so via poddirectory.com. If you have an Android, you can find us on Stitcher Radio. For iPhone or iPad users, find us on iTunes. Please rate us and also leave comments on iTunes so we know how we are doing. To follow me, the host, or stay updated on the projects that I'm working on and be inspired, please visit me at www.missuduak.com. That's MSUDUAK.com. Or you can follow me on Twitter via my personal Twitter handle at UduakLaw, at UDUAKLaw, the at symbol UDUAKLaw. For licensing inquiries, sponsorship inquiries, if you'd like me to come speak at your event or host your event or moderate your event, or you'd just like to give feedback or appear as a guest on the show, please email me at africamusiclaw@gmail.com. If you're seeking legal representation or have specific questions about your specific situation or matter, please email me directly at my law firm email, and that is uduak@ebitulawgrp.com. The information on this show is just general information, so for your specific needs, please directly contact me via email or contact a local attorney wherever you may be. All right, we are ready to get this show started, and when we come back, we'll get into what I'll be talking about today, which is about the Okafors Law movie, and I'm going to be telling you specifically 4 mistakes that I believe Omoni Oboli made that got her in copyright infringement trouble. The lawsuit that's currently filed against her, her production company, as well as Film One Limited, one of Nigeria's leading film distribution companies. Alright, AML people, let's really get into this case, which is very, very interesting because of what it stands for. And maybe that's why it's no surprise that it's like the biggest talked about story everywhere, beyond the fact that it's still being litigated, meaning that it's still in court, it's still ongoing. But what law are we dealing with? That's the first place we always start, so we understand the tools that we're using to apply to the legal issues before us. So the law we're talking about today is Nigeria's Copyright Act, Cap 28, Laws of the Federation of Nigeria 2004. On the U.S. end, because I'm going to cross-reference the U.S., I'm a U.S.-based attorney, obviously, and there are lots of parallels with our entertainment industry and that of Nollywood as well. So the U.S. Copyright Act that we're going to be dealing with is the 1976 Copyright Act. So you hear me jump back and forth for parallels, so we really understand what we're talking about here. Let's talk about the parties. One of the key things I hope to see happen down the line is a true education of how the media and journalists report legal issues. I know when I started, it was very, very rare, especially in the entertainment space. Not very rare. It did not exist in the entertainment space to have legal reporting. Over time, that's improved, but we really often don't understand what we're talking about. and the issues we're talking about, and sometimes it gets really convoluted. So the parties here, let's identify and get clear on who the parties are. A lot of reporting is that Jude Ideda, the screenplay writer, all the same, he specifically has filed a lawsuit. That's a lot of reporting that I've seen against the defendants. But the plaintiff here is Raconteur Productions, and they have sued Omoni Oboli in her individual capacity. They've sued Dione Visions Limited, her productions company, and they've sued Film One Limited. Raconteur Productions is affiliated with someone by the name of Chioma Onyewe, and that name comes into the picture when we talk about the facts, looking at the screenwriter's version, Jude Ideda's version, and we'll talk about that later on. But here's what I want you all to note very specifically about the parties. It's very important if you own an entertainment business to incorporate your business. And when you incorporate your business, the whole point of it is it gives you legal protection, a shield. Now we're in the area of business law. And as you all know, I, of course, do business law. You can't, work with an entertainment field, fashion and entertainment, and not have business law as part of it, because you have to understand how entities work, etc., and incorporation and all that good stuff. So when you form a business entity, or ideally, as a business owner, one of the things you want to avoid is your assets being affected when someone, for example, institutes an action against you, which is inevitable when you do business. At some point, you run into someone claiming that you've wronged them, whether in the intellectual property capacity or whatever the capacity may be. Now, Omoni Oboli in this case is sued personally. Why is she sued personally? That's an important question to know. She has a productions company, so why isn't it just Dione Visions Limited? And then, of course, Kene Nkparu's Film One Limited. After all, Kene, in his individual capacity, has not been sued here. Well, there's a concept in business law or corporate law in Nigeria that would be company law. And what it's called is piercing the corporate veil. And the whole idea about it is, look, even though you have incorporated your business where you are shielded, there are instances where a court will say, look, your actions require me to put away the shield that you have, this limited liability that you have, and I'm going to hold you, the shareholder or the directors, personally liable for the corporation's actions. So when that happens, and it's not just the actions, the debts that the corporation might owe as well. So when that happens, that's called piercing the corporate veil. And it's very common, particularly when you're dealing with close corporations that are closely held and not listed on the stock exchange. So a lot of entertainment companies in the African space. Actually, I don't think I'm even aware. Maybe you guys might be aware of African-owned companies that are listed on either the Nigerian Stock Exchange or any stock exchange across the continent or in the US, any entertainment companies. In future, I know that Chocolate City was aiming for that. The point is that often when courts pierce the corporate veil, often you'll find that in the context of close corporations, closely held corporations where the companies are not listed publicly on a stock exchange, for example. So that's the first thing, and that you need to understand about what's going on here with the parties. Now let's get into the facts. There are two versions of facts that we are going to look at. The first version is that of the screenwriter as told to the media, and then also as communicated through Raconteur Productions in court filings. It's very, very important. I've said this so many times, particularly with Nigerians. I mean, often we hear Nigerians aloud. I've just never, for whatever reason, thought of Nigerians as loud. I guess just because, you grew up in the environment, you never really think that much. But I think I'm starting to really believe that we're quite loud, and we're also quite emotional people and very reactionary as well. When there are issues, I find that other African groups are more concerned about really, really embarrassing themselves online, social media. We don't care. We just put all that crap on social media. I don't know if the point or goal is to disgrace people that are involved in or whatever the case may be, but we put it out there. The other second thing that we do is we talk to the media. Talking to the media, there's a time and a place to talk to the media, and there's a way in what you say to the media. And there must be a careful selection of the choice of words of what you tell the media as well. Judy Dada had absolutely no business granting an interview to the media for 30 minutes to 45 minutes to discuss specifically stealing of his copyright or intellectual property rights in Okafors Law, which he did September of 2016 during the film screening of that particular movie at the Toronto International Film Festival. So, again, remember, when you have issues, that's why you have lawyers. Nigeria and a lot of Africa has courtrooms, has attorneys, has competent attorneys, has attorneys who are willing to gain competency in whatever the area of law is, which is a requisite requirement anyways to practice law.
Show.
So the first people you run to when you say or think there's an infringement of your intellectual property rights certainly can't be the media or the public. You're not doing anyone any good, and definitely not doing yourself any good when you do that. You're just making a spectacle of yourself. And the more the public gets educated, the sillier you look doing that. Anyway, let's get into the facts that Jude Idada communicated to the public. He says Omoni Oboli contacted him to write a screenplay for the title of a movie she had called Okafors Law. He doesn't dispute the title or that she came up with the title. That's not an issue here. He says he didn't have the time, so he turned her down, saying, "Sorry, I can't write your screenplay for you." She, however, persisted. So what he did was he took on that role and he wrote an initial treatment. And unfortunately, he lost it during a trip to Uganda because his computer got stolen, and his computer had the initial treatment, the first draft that he had written that was now stolen in Uganda. He says, subsequently after the theft incident, he contacted Omoni and he promised to, he told her the situation and promised to rewrite the whole entire script. She said, okay, go forward and do that. Write the entire script. He said he rewrote it. Then he made a subsequent contact with Omoni and he sent her a contract to sign for the script. He says she never signed the contract. And all attempts to get her to sign, or her husband, who is involved in the production company, didn't go anywhere. So subsequently, he communicated to her, I'm not sure what means he chose, but he essentially said, look, you can keep your title, Okafors Law, but as far as I'm concerned, everything else you don't get to have. So what do we mean by everything else? The plot, the theme, the dialogue, the mood, the settings, the pace, the sequence, all that stuff that are germane, that are protectable elements when it comes to copyright law, and particularly when you're talking about screenplays, you don't get to have that. That belongs to me because all you came to me with was your title, and I built and wrote and created the story. Again, she was non-responsive, so what he ended up doing was deciding to go a different direction. That's where Rankatur Productions comes into play. Rankatur Productions, the Chioma lady I talked about, was interested in the script and subsequently purchased the script from him. In the process of producing, casting, getting ready for this whole production of the film that Chioma wanted to create through Rankatur Productions, she finds out that, hey, Omoni Oboli is already creating Okafors Law. And in addition, according to Jude Idada, he finds out that Omoni Oboli is going around saying that he's the one who stole her intellectual copyright, particularly Okafors Law, and the story and everything involved in it, not the title, because the title is a non-issue. And for copyright purposes as well, the title is a non-issue. Titles are not copyrightable. The focus is specifically the script itself. So, what ends up happening? According to his version, that's when he decided, instead of going to an attorney to talk about it, which should have probably been the first instinctive step he should have taken, although he does say that he did register his copy of the script with the Canada Copyright Office. I don't know what year particularly he did that. But anyway, last year, September 2016, the movie Okafors Law, before its premiere, before its screening, etc., is selected to be shown at TIFF, Toronto International Film Festival, a prestigious film festival. And it really upset him, but he didn't want to interrupt. He did not want to sue her or get into any legal shenanigans, because knowing Nigerians, knowing our people very well, he didn't want to be blamed as the sole person that got in the way of the progress of Nollywood, number one. Number two, it wasn't just her movie. There were other Nigerian movies that were being screened as well. It was a whole collective. I know what's that movie? The wedding Kemi Adetiba directed for Moa Budu's Ebony Life. Ebony Life Films was all part of that, and the list goes on and on of just Nigeria really got a lot of shine, and he didn't want to undermine that or create any issues as to that. Now, it's very interesting to note something he said. He says, not wanting to get in the way, during that time, September of last year, he instead granted this interview to TNS.ng, where he essentially shared all this wrongdoing in a 30 to 45 minute interview. Now, if I'm the one representing Omoni Oboli, and they've already used that as well, I would definitely subpoena that. And well, I don't even have to subpoena it. It's readily available online. I'd make sure I have that, and I would use that to definitely go to work on him in terms of the alleged ownership of the script, because he basically gives everything away, which allows a defense to really prepare their case in advance. Because, I mean, if you say anything else that contradicts that, it's as easy as impeaching him on the witness stand and also showing the contradictions in everything he said. So, again, for everyone listening, the filmmakers, screenwriters, Nollywood people, musicians, everyone listening, everything you say on social media can and will be used against you in a court of law. Get real and get a grip on yourselves when you have issues. Social media is not the place to just go off all over the place. And if you won't listen, then, be prepared to pay the kind of attorney fees you will be paying, and be prepared for a long battle ahead, because it will come, I promise you. And when it does come, you'll wish that you didn't put all that stuff out there. So, what's fascinating and interesting in the interview that Jude Idada gave to TNS.ng is he claims that Omoni Oboli had stolen his work in the past, and he let it slide. And specifically, the work that she stole in the past from him was Being Mrs. Elliot. Now, depending on the statute of limitation in Nigeria, so the cutoff time to sue, it's not too late to sue on that as well. So if in fact he has the Being Mrs. Elliot, he registered the copyright, or even if he didn't register, because you don't need to register under Nigerian law, Nigerian copyright law, he can go sue her and get the accounting and the profits from all that money that she made off of Being Mrs. Elliot. So it's not too late. So long as he knows he can prove that for sure, that she stole Being Mrs. Elliot from him, then he needs to get his lawyers, and he needs to go and he needs to get paid for Being Mrs. Elliot. Because Nollywood particularly, I've said that when I first got involved in Nollywood over a decade ago, which is how I even ended up with the whole African music law related stuff. I just saw a void. I thought, okay, let me fill that void, but it didn't change the direction that I was going with film and that I'm still going. But I've said over and over again, over a decade ago when I began this journey, that it's so interesting. Nollywood screams like nobody's business. Screams like nobody's business on piracy and copyright infringement. But all you have to do is watch just any Nollywood films, and it's just rampant with copyright theft from A to Z. Majority of our films are. And until we can learn to respect other people's copyrights, we shouldn't be surprised if ours are infringed on. So we have a long way to go, and we need to hold people accountable We can't look at how pretty they are. We can't look at how popular they are. We can't look at how smart they are, etc. When it comes to favoritism, we got to just call it out the way they call out other people infringing on their content. We've just got to call it out the same way. Let's go to Omoni Oboli's version of what she says occurred. She says, in mid-2014, she came up with the idea and story for Okafors Law. By September 2014, she registered it with the National Films and Videos Censors Board. She says the board regulates the Nigerian film industry. Now, folks, note a difference. The board regulating the Nigerian film industry has nothing to do with the legal discussion or legal issues of copyright law, intellectual property law. Intellectual property law and the regulation of it or ensuring that your IP rights are protected is strictly within the purview of the Nigerian Copyright Commission, not the Nigerian Censors Board. The Nigerian Censors Board might have certain things, but in terms of the legal significance of it, you go to the Nigerian Copyright Commission and you register your work there. That's how that should work, and that's how that works. Now, she says after registration of Okafors Law, the title, she contacted Jude Idada to write a screenplay based on her idea, concept, and story. She says he agreed. She says later on, he contacted her and said the work that he had written was lost when his computer was stolen in Uganda and promised to rewrite it. So far so good. Their stories check out on both ends in terms of, hey, I contacted you, I asked you to write a screenplay. Whether I forced you or not is besides the point. I asked you to write a screenplay. You agreed to write a screenplay. You wrote a screenplay. The work was lost. You told me it was lost, and you told me you would rewrite it. She says after he made this promise, she subsequently made several attempts to contact him to say, hey, where's the script? Where's the script? Is it ready yet? Is it ready yet? And she says after so many failed attempts to contact him, she decided to write the script herself. Now, remember in his version, he said he was very, very busy. He didn't really have time, but she really begged him, and so he decided to do it. And even the more details of it is he had all kinds of travels, so many clients to attend to. And so it was sort of like, okay, I'll try my best to get this done for you. Almost like a favoritism. I'm doing you a favor, which is a red flag on his end, which is a red flag on both sides, which is a red flag on both sides. And I'll discuss that very, very soon. So those are the facts on both ends. Who do we find most credible? Let's see what we can do with the law. Let's see how the law maybe helps us reach the closest possible answer of who is really, really telling as accurate a truth as possible when we strip down everything as much as we can. So that leads me to the mistakes that I believe those two people made in trying to get in bed with one another, which is a terminology we use which is a saying we use in the entertainment industry. Be careful who you get in bed with. Let's see what they did wrong in this relationship, this business relationship. Let's take a quick break and we'll come back and talk about the 4 mistakes that I believe got Omoni Oboli into copyright infringement trouble. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. Let's now talk about the 4 mistakes that I believe Omoni Oboli made, which got her into copyright infringement trouble. Mistake number 1, choosing the wrong partner or choosing the wrong partnership. There's a popular saying in the entertainment industry which goes like this: be careful who you get into bed with. Be careful who you get into bed with. It's a popular saying in the entertainment industry. This means that you really have to treat it as a relationship. This just happens to be a business relationship, but the same fundamental principles of relationships stay in place. Think of it as a romantic relationship. You're trying to meet someone for the first time. You guys are going to date, and this person just simply doesn't have time for you. The person is so busy. assuming that they're extremely good looking, famous, everybody wants to be with them. They seem to express some interest in you, but overall they're just too busy. Would you, especially if you're a confident person, would you try by all means necessary to go to someone who just simply doesn't have your time? That's a complete waste of your time. And probability is you're not going to get their full undivided attention. And the relationship is probably not even going to kick off, much less work well at all. So take that analogy and apply it to mistake number one here. You've got two people, Omoni Oboli, and then you've got the screenplay writer or the screenwriter, Jude. Jude is saying he's too busy. He was so busy, Omoni had to really, really beg him. And even then, he had all his clients he had to service. And he said, okay, I'll try my best to do what I can do. And so he created an informal treatment of her story. Hello. That's all red flags right there. Or red flag. He's too busy. He doesn't have your time. He comes back the second time with all his busyness and says, hey, I actually wrote a script, an informal treatment, according to his testimony in this interview that he gives tns.ng. But guess what? It got lost because somebody stole my computer. So that should send more red flags because this script is a very important script that you want to be able to produce someday. And it's what you're going to take to investors, and the list goes on, and spend advertising money and campaigns and get this movie in theaters and in film festivals. And you're choosing a partner who is not able to secure an important script like that to the point where it gets stolen and you don't even know where that script is. And now you're asking him to rewrite, or he's volunteering to rewrite, and you're like, oh yeah, go ahead and rewrite. This relationship is not a desperate situation, and it was treated in a very desperate situation scenario. On the flip side, for Jude, you claim that somebody has been stealing from you, stole from you, and made a lot of money, or at least publicity as being, yes, the it filmmaker, with being Mrs. Elliot. Why are you going back into a completely unhealthy relationship, especially since you claim and list yourself as an award-winning screenwriter, someone who's so busy with so many clients and have all these things to do? Why put up with somebody who doesn't respect your work, who's not professional, and who has the audacity to steal from you? What sense does that make? So mistake number one, choosing the wrong partner, choosing the wrong people to partner with. Filmmakers listening to this, get your pens and papers out if you haven't already. And let me be unequivocally clear. Sometimes we get too caught up in the celebrity name or the person. You need to look past that and the celebrity and focus on the work and focus on the professionalism that that person brings to the table. And if they don't have it, I can promise you it's not worth trying to get in bed with that person, because it will lead to just a really terrible relationship, conflicts, bad reputation. And before you know it, you're going to have to be dealing with lawyers, not from the perspective of helping you to make money, but having to defend so you don't lose a lot of money, as Omoni Oboli finds herself and as Jude finds himself as well, because they both chose to partner with each other and they were simply not compatible based on both sides on what they say their conduct and how they treated each other was in the first place. So ensure that you choose the right partner. So that was her mistake number one. Mistake number two that Omoni Oboli made was not to have an agreement in place. I find it absolutely ridiculous and preposterous that you would find Jude as the one chasing Omoni to write a contract or sign a contract with him. In what world does a filmmaker like Omoni, with her exposure and everything else, not know that the very first thing she needs to be doing is have an agreement in place with Jude before he even starts doing any work whatsoever that she's asked him to do? I find that so ridiculous. But let's zoom in on what Omoni Oboli has told us in court file documents. She said very specifically that she had Jude write a screenplay based on her idea, concept, and story. We also know that she registered the title with the Nigerian Film Board or Nigerian Film Censors Board, but at the time, as of 2014, she had not actually written a script. Neither did she register it anywhere with the Copyright Commission, and she hasn't produced a script that she registered. So far, so good. So, the fundamental question is, under copyright law, is her idea, concept, and story protected? The answer is no. First of all, copyright does not protect your idea. It protects the expression of that idea. Copyright does not protect your story ideas either. It doesn't protect your concepts. Those are not something that's protected by copyright law. So let's get that straight. Now, understanding that in getting into a relationship with Jude, the first thing that she had to do, regardless whether she understood that or not, just from basic contract law, is put something in writing to say, hey, Jude, I want you to do this work. I want you to write this screenplay. When you write this screenplay, understand that everything is going to go to my company, Dioni Visions. I will own that. When you do that under Nigerian copyright law and U.S. copyright law, that's what's called work made for hire or work made for hire agreement. So under this work made for hire agreement, she would write a contract. She would say, hey, I'm commissioning you for this work. And when you're done with it, all your intellectual property rights belong to me, belong to my company, that is, and I own this right out. She didn't do that. That's one way she could have protected herself. Another way would be if she intended for it to be both of them as joint authors, although it doesn't sound like she was interested in doing that. So co-owners of the work. She could have set up a collaboration agreement, which essentially would say, hey, Jude, you and I are collaborating on this to write Okafors Law, and you agree that I'm going to have ownership of the screenplay. You agree about the allocation of expenses, the distribution of the work, etc. You know, she would tell specifically what percentage she would own, what percentage he owns, if any at all. She could have done that too if that's what she intended. She didn't. So the third kind of agreement that she could have gone into with him is basically, think of it as almost a non-disclosure agreement where she says, hey, I'm telling you my idea, my concept, my story, and you agree that you will not divulge it or use it for yourself. I mean, they can contract around that. And if he ends up doing that, then he essentially has violated that contract agreement, which is the basis of why she told him the story, the concept, the idea. So it need not be protected through copyright law. It can simply be protected through contract law, basic contract law. And that would have prevented the situation in terms of if he breached that contract and then goes and writes this whole thing and gives it to Rancoteur Productions, then she could sue him for breach of contract. So that's another way to have gotten around that issue if she was that concerned. But the point is, she didn't even bother. She didn't even have any agreement whatsoever. So that's mistake number 2 that she made. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back and talk about mistake number 3 and 4.
You're listening to the AfricaMusicLaw.com show.
Welcome back, everyone. Let's talk about mistake number 3 and mistake number 4. Mistake number 3 is that Omoni Oboli failed to register her script with the Nigerian Copyrights Commission, the script she claimed she had all along or wrote, and that Judy Dada did not write her screenplay for her. So, before we explore the shenanigans of copyright law, I already mentioned to you all that she said that the screenplay that she wrote was based on her idea, her concept, and her story. And I already told you all that if you write your idea, concept, story idea on paper, it's not protected by copyright law. It's not protected when it's in your head, and it's certainly not protected just because you scribble the idea down. What is protected, we'll talk a little bit more about that in terms of where a screenplay is concerned. However, let's zoom in on that story part that Omoni Oboli took to Jude Idada so he could write a screenplay for her. If you want a good movie, you need a good script. And if you want a good script, you have to have a good story. Now, just because you have one story idea doesn't mean that 20 other people don't have the same story idea that you have. So your idea is not protected. However, if she had written the script, that's protected. If she has, created the movie off of that script, that's protected under copyright law. We'll get into the specific elements that are protected, but let me come back to that story and talk a little bit more about it. When it comes to developing a story, the really good screenwriters, the really good writers that make us remember stories, remember the movies we watch, are writers who write what they know. They have the experiences, the life experiences, and they really know the situation inside out. Now, sometimes you may not know a situation inside out, but you can research to really, really know this thing inside out. So the question is, who is more likely to write a very, very credible story about Okafors Law, Omoni Oboli or Jude Idada? Which brings up the question of what is Okafors Law? Okafors Law, according to the idea that Omoni Oboli had, which Jude Idada doesn't dispute, is this. If you're a guy and you're in a relationship with a girl and you guys become exes, once you've had that romantic relationship, even if that girl is married, where she might even be in another relationship, the point is, once you have that sexual intercourse, you will always have that sexual intercourse no matter what with her because you're a guy and you're her ex. So in Yoruba, it's once debe, always debe, as they tease in the trailer of Omoni Oboli's Okafors Law. So once debe, always debe. So let's go back again. Is that something that Omoni Oboli can write in a very credible way, in a very convincing way as a woman? I would argue no. I would argue that if she could write it, she would have done that since. She wouldn't have gone to Jude Idada. She doesn't need Jude to write that story. Of course, as a woman, especially a Nigerian woman, we know about the stories. We've heard, we know people that are in relationships and still are, having sexual intercourse with their exes. We hear it all around us. A lot of people take that to be commonplace, especially when you're in a Nigerian society. So can Omoni Oboli draw from those societal experiences of what she's heard and seen, maybe guy friends she knows and all that? Yeah, that's plausible and possible. But to really get into the characters, to understand the plot, to really build out the story where it is credible and convincing, I think that someone like Jude Idada, even just from a male standpoint, would be able to get into that story a lot more and get into the crooks and crannies and places that maybe a woman would not be able to get into because of the exposure into the male group, because males usually will not expose that kind of information directly to women. In general, they don't do that. So again, once Debe, always Debe, is that something that, Omoni Oboli can write about? Sure, of course. But I would argue that she needed Jude. She understood that. That's why she went to Jude, because he could get her that good screenplay she was looking for based on her idea. He could really, really flesh out and create a good script. Now let's transition and let's talk about the ways that a filmmaker acquires a story, because I think that's very important for you to understand the point of her not registering her copyright. There are three ways particularly that a filmmaker will acquire a script to produce a film. The first is that a filmmaker will write his or her own story. Now, when you write your own story, obviously you don't deal with copyright issues or shenanigans. The only thing you do is just to register your work with the Copyright Commission. And even then, it's not a requirement that you register your work. But the point is, you don't have to deal with other people claiming that you infringed on their copyright, especially if they never sent you the script, you have no dealings with them whatsoever, and you just wrote your own story. So one way to avoid problems is to write your own script. The other way is that you can option the script or book or novel or short story. So there can be somebody else that's written this. You really like it. You think it's commercially viable. And even though you could write a script yourself, you feel that your script will not be as commercially viable, which is always an important factor if you're trying to produce a film. So then you go to whoever that owner of the book is or scriptwriter and say, hey, can I option your script? Optioning your script, think of it as a short lease where you get their consent and pay them whatever the sum of money is, even as low as $1, depending on the owner of the script to produce this film. So let me give you an example. Lupita Nyong'o, the Kenyan actress who studied at Yale, and we all know now, the 12 Years of the Slave actress. Lupita Nyong'o liked Nigerian author Chimamanda Adichie's book, Americana. So guess what she did? She contacted Chimamanda. She says, I like your book and I'd like to option the rights to use it so that I can bring it to the big screen. So that's an example of an option taking place. And I think Brad Pitt is involved now in helping Lupita with ultimately producing Americana. So that's number 2 way that filmmakers acquire scripts. The third and final way is they can work with the writer. So if you don't believe that you have the necessary skill set to create that structure, that dialogue, that character, you can find someone that can complement maybe the skills you have or partner
You're
with
listening to the
that person
AfricaMusicLaw.com
to
show.
create the script that you want to produce. Now, remember mistake number 2, I talked about no agreement. That's at that point where you should be having your agreements in place. And that's at that point where you should be defining whether you want them work for hire, whether you want a specific, just straight up collaboration where you're joint authors, or just defining what you want to do with that relationship, which we know Omoni Oboli did not do. Now, let's talk about copyright law. If you go to episode number 13, I really spell out copyright law. So I'm not going to get into as much details than to just focus only on the stuff that's germane to us. What you should know on the Nigerian copyright law, and it's the same in the US, is this. On the Nigerian copyright law, once you create an original work and it is fixed in a definite medium of expression, it has automatic copyright protection. So, what does that mean? I've created this podcast. It is fixed in a definite medium of expression. That's an MP3. You're listening to it. It's copyright protected. If you want to use it, you need to contact me and ask for my consent and pay whatever fees I'm asking that you pay in order to use it. That's why in the beginning of the show, I say for licensing inquiries, contact me. So you are licensing my work to listen and to use it for whatever platforms you want to use the MP3. So it's fixed in a definite medium of expression. On the US side, the language that's used and it's very similar is you create an original work and it is fixed in a tangible medium of expression. They all both mean the same thing. Once you do that, it automatically has copyright protection. Let's go back to the story. So Omoni Oboli tells us that by September 2014, she registered the title Okafors Law. Well, just registering the title doesn't qualify for copyright protection. She then contacted Jude to write the screenplay after September 2004. And remember, she claims he never wrote or submitted the screenplay to her. So when she wrote her own screenplay, assuming her statement is true, it would have been very, very helpful for her to take her screenplay, her script, and registered it with the Nigerian Copyright Commission. Because when you do that, even though you're not required under Nigerian law to register your copyright Same in the US, you're not required to register that work that you've created. It automatically has copyright protection. But if you do, it's a prima facie evidence that you own the script. So it would have established a rebuttable presumption that, hey, you know what? Omoni Oboli owns the script. So now that Jude is claiming copyright infringement, all she has to do is, hey, here are my receipts from the Nigerian Copyright Commission. I already have this work copyrighted to begin with before you sent me your work. And so there's no way I could have infringed on your copyright. Since she didn't do that, all we have to do now is trace emails on both ends. If you're the attorney representing either one of them, you're subpoenaing records, you're putting a preservation of evidence letter, making sure that on both sides they preserve all evidence on their computers and emails. And you're certainly also subpoenaing those evidence so that you can find out what exactly was on that computer in terms of their emails back and forth. Find information that proves or disproves who the copyright owner is. I've told you that once you create an original work and it's fixed in a tangible medium of expression, copyright kicks in and protects it. But what is copyright? Copyright simply means the right to copy. And once you have this automatic copyright protection, it gives you a bundle of rights. So think of a broomstick, the traditional broomstick back in Nigeria that we used to sweep around the compounds and all that. You know, it's like a bundle of sticks together. So you get those bundle of rights like that. And with the bundle of rights, here's what you can do. Let's go back to my example of an MP3 or a video. I created a simple short teaser video for this particular episode that I'm putting up on YouTube. So, what can I do with the copyright? Or what can I authorize somebody else to do or stop somebody else from doing? I can reproduce my MP3 in various forms. So my words that I'm speaking right now, assuming I'm an artist, this is my lyrics, or I'm speaking as a speaker, these are my words. I can have that printed in a publication. I can have photocopies of it made. I can record it in any media like I am with MP3 and MP4 later on for YouTube. I can have a public performance of my work. As performing, for example, in a theater, I can get up and perform this work. I can record my work in the form of a CD, a cassette, videotape. I can broadcast it on radio, on cable, or satellite. I can translate the work into other languages around the world, or I can have it adapted from a novel to screenplays. And then finally, I can have my work distributed commercially by way of sales, hiring, or rental. This is all what the Nigerian copyright law allows me to do. And under the US law, very parallel, I have the same similar bundle of rights. So how long will that copyright last that I have? For films, sound recordings, the beats that producers make, the owner will enjoy copyright for 50 years from the time the work was first published. That's very, very specific to films and sound recordings and performances under Nigerian Copyright Act. Now, if the work is a literary work, an artistic work, or musical work, then copyright will last for your lifetime and 70 years after you die under Nigerian copyright law. Are you required to register your copyright? Absolutely not under Nigerian copyright law. But again, if you do, as I said, in situations like this, it's a good thing because it sets what a Latin term, prima facie evidence, some people call it prima facie evidence. It sets the premise that you are the rightful and correct copyright owner of that work, of that script you're talking about, until someone comes and tries to rebut that you don't own it. But the court will assume right off the bat, you've registered the work, you own the work. So it's a good idea to register. Now, note for US listeners that you do need to register your work if you're going to sue someone for copyright infringement in the federal court in the US. In Nigeria, that requirement is not there. It's a very good idea to register your work so when situations like this happen, you have ample, very strong substantiated evidence proving that you are in fact the copyright owner of your work. In case you guys are unaware, you need to go on to visit Nigeria's, and I'll put it in the show note, visit the Nigerian Copyright Commission online. And they've got this thing called NCERS. It's an online registration for your copyrights. It's easy to walk through the whole process and create an account and register. And that is a feature that was established in 2014 for the online registration, but the actual office has been there since physically that Omoni Oboli could have walked in and register her copyright. The point is you can go online now and easily register.
You're
in case
listening
you're not
to the
aware,
AfricaMusicLaw.com
and get
show.
your works registered online. Very easy if you want to register your work. Get an attorney to help you out. And if you can't, if you don't want to get an attorney to help you out, you can again go directly and do that. Now, when we talk about a screenplay, what is copyright protected in the case of a screenplay? Because we know that the titles, the ideas, the concepts are not protected. Well, first, it's important to just talk very, very briefly about the value chain of a screenplay. So just as much as we would look at a music value chain. So from the point a songwriter puts a pen to paper, writes a song, and we take it all the way to the recording artist, and all the way to ultimately getting it to retail, that whole value chain. We also have a similar value chain in the fashion industry. You have the raw materials and you take it all the way to the point where the designer creates the designs and ultimately we get it to retail, all the different ancillary third parties involved from PR to media, etc. And ultimately we get it to the consumer. So we have a similar value chain when we're talking about script writing. And the value chain is as follows. You've got the filmmaker, in this instance, Omoni Oboli. She has this idea, this concept. She goes to Jude and says, hey, Jude, I want you to really help me with this. And so what is Jude really helping her with? One of the first things he would do, and I want you guys to really appreciate the work that goes into this, he has to develop the idea. And in doing that, he has to consider, okay, is this going to be very marketable? How affordable is it going to be? Is it going to be really marketable for the Nigerian market? Is the story really going to sell? Remember, he mentions in his interview that he was really thinking a lot about also aspects that she talks about, the religious aspects of Nigerian audience and how to put that into the story as well. So he'll do that. He'll build the premise out. That means he's going to determine what the parameters of the story is, the style, the structure. He will write the title. In this instance, Omoni Oboli already had the title. The title was catchy enough, so he didn't have to worry about that. He will build the theme. That means he's going to make sure every scene supports the moral of the story. The moral of the story of, Okafors Law. He will write the log line, and he insists that he did write the log line, which is a short paragraph of the story, and must include the conflict. Where is the conflict created in the story of once Debe, always Debe, Okafors Law? He mentions that he wrote the treatment. So the treatment is where it really just fleshes out the story into a fuller, robust story, makes it fuller, makes it more interesting. And then he said he had the first draft. The first draft is a 90-page document that you see on africamusiclaw.com. I also uploaded it on Scribd, SCRIBD.com, Scribd.com. So he wrote the first draft, the first 90 pages, and that's where he said he stopped. What happens after the first 90 page in this whole value chain would be that he would come back and after Omoni Oboli looks through everything, he would rewrite the story at that point, make sure that he polishes anything that needs to be polished, make sure the story is just perfect for her. And then at that point, he protects the story. In the US, it's the US Copyright Office or the Writers Guild, but highly recommend the US Copyright Office because the Writers Guild doesn't give you that kind of legal protection that's necessary in a copyright infringement case. And to sue, you need to register with the US Copyright Office. In Nigeria, that would be the Nigerian Copyright Commission. And then once you have that registration, then it's time to produce the movie if you're the one that's going to produce the movie, or you option it as I talked to you guys about. So that's the whole value chain that happens. So knowing the value chain in the screenplay, what are protectable elements? Here I'm going to switch to US law because I don't really know the protectable elements on the Nigerian law. I'm going to presume they're parallel. And the reason why is I've not been able to see some case laws specifically focused on issues of copyright infringement where screenplay is involved. However, in the US, protectable elements through case law have shown that it includes the plot, the theme, the dialogue, the mood, the setting, the pace, the sequence. So if a Nigerian court over in Nigeria is evaluating this case under its copyright law, probability is at a minimum they will look at the plot, the dialogue, the mood, the setting, the pace, the sequence. How does one determine whether copyright infringement has occurred? Here again, I'm going to look at US law, which is very similar and parallel to Nigerian law. The first thing is there a valid establishment of an ownership of a copyright? So if you look over at Omoni Oboli over there, can she establish a valid ownership of copyright under Nigerian copyright law? Well, she doesn't really have the document registered. However, that's not a requirement under Nigerian copyright law. It would have been helpful. But the ownership of copyright is the first thing that a court would look at. Number two, court would look at a defendant's access to the copyrighted material. And access in this instance just means the alleged infringer's opportunity to view or copy a plaintiff's work. That's all access means. And in this instance, it seems like there's a strong possibility of showing access via email through the writings that Jude claims he submitted to Omoni Oboli. The final thing that a court will look at here is the substantial similarity of the works. Now, if you go on africamusiclaw.com or you go to script, scribd.com, script.com, and you type up Jude Idada, you will see an upload that I uploaded on both sites, document that Jude had released to the media. And it contains all the similarities, lots of paragraphs, 2 pages, lots of different paragraphs of similarities between Omoni Oboli's script and his, with the difference only being the names of the characters being changed. So in that instance, courts would look at substantial similarity. They'll look at the totality of it all, the ownership of copyright, the defendant's access to the copyrighted work, and also the substantial similarity of the works. And then they would conclude whether an infringement has occurred or not occurred here. Those factors are very parallel to the Nigerian copyright infringement analysis in how a court looks at this.
You're listening to the AfricaMusicLaw.com show.
Let's talk about the final mistake number 4. I believe mistake number 4 is the terrible crisis management that has occurred in this case. I think Omoni Oboli heard Jude's claims since last year, September 2016. And from everything I can see, read, and conclude, and also based on her own representations, in my view, she's acted very egotistical, condescending, and outright just ignored him. I mean, ignored him to the point of almost rudeness. And I think that's a bad idea. Even till now, she continues to handle this case very badly. At the end of the day, this is about deal making and making money out of this movie. So if someone's claiming that they own a script to a movie you've produced, which directly affects your investors, which directly affects your ability to market it, not just in your country, but to market and distribute it across the continent and globally, you should sit up. You should try to resolve that. You should nip that stuff in the bud. You shouldn't think that, okay, it's just going to go away and you can get away with not dealing with the issue, because even if the people within your country take a chance on it, you're going to have a problem on international shores. You have a problem in Canada. You have a problem in the US, because it's easy, especially since Jude claims that he registered the script in Canada with the Canada Copyright Office. It's easy, especially when you start hitting the Western territories, for him to now make it very hard for you to be able to distribute and sell your movie. So you have a vested interest to fix that issue. And so to ignore it the way she has, and to act like just very, very egotistical in my view, very, very egotistical. I don't really think there's a place for that. And I don't think that that's a woman that's putting on her business head and really thinking about the big picture, not just about herself, but about the other third party players that she's doing business with, and trying to find a resolution to this. I think this issue can be resolved I think it can be resolved without it having to go through the long drama of litigation. But if they can't do that, well, that's what litigation is all about. And at least we'll have a very important case that lays it out for us what copyright infringement specifically is as it relates to the movie industry. And that sets precedent for what will happen in future. Now, my final closing thoughts on this particular case. Number one, I want to thank Kene Mparu of Film One Limited, who's one of the named defendants, for his action of not premiering the feature film on March 24th. That act alone was so significant and I think has changed and will change the entire course of Nollywood to really, really make people obey the rule of law, to really make Nollywood practitioners think before they acquire scripts and how they also go about doing it and doing it legitimately. To a large extent, I think Jude has already won this copyright litigation drama. To a large extent, I think Rancoteur has also won this particular copyright drama. They had her think twice. They had the opportunity to make Kene Mparu stop premiere of that movie. Now, I do realize that a big part of it is that Kene Mparu has a relationship with IMAX, a Canada-based company, and IMAX is a global brand. So he has a vested interest as well, not to have one movie maker spoil business or spoil markets for him entirely just because she made a movie and is trying to have it premiered in his theaters. Nevertheless, I think it's so significant that he obeyed the law. And so hats off to you, Kene Mparu. I'm very proud of that action because, again, it's just a whole new level, whole new ball game in the Nigerian movie industry. There's not much else to say about this case. We could talk about the damages, and there's really not much to say than that if you have an action for infringement under Nigerian law, there's many remedies available to you, one of which is actual monetary damages. You can also have an injunction. We did say a preliminary injunction, if you will. By that, I mean an initial attempt at an injunction, which is just what I was talking about. Kene Mparu obeyed that injunction. So March 24th, we didn't have the premiere. The injunction was to continue till March the 31st onwards and to stop the actual distribution and sale of the movie or screening nationwide. And the court went ahead and reversed the injunction. Another remedy that's typically available in copyright infringement cases is accounts of profits. So if Rancoteur Productions prevails, then Omoni Oboli has to account for all the profits she makes from all the screening and sale of the movie, and she'll have to then give them their part. So those are examples of damages that are available under copyright infringement cases in the US and certainly also in Nigeria. We'll stop here. We will stop here. There's a lot for you guys to absorb. And until next time on the next podcast episode, cheers, people.